Hey, hello everyone and welcome to Extreme Graphics Tech. My name is Angelo. It's been like a month, I think maybe more, that I have not uploaded a video. Well, the only reason is because I didn't have any interesting videos for the channel to upload, so that's it. I'm not going to upload videos just because, okay? But on today, I didn't want to end the year without making one of those videos that are this GPU in 2024, and there is one GPU that I haven't tested since 2022, and that's none other than the GTX 1070. This was the first GPU, not this model, I had the Founders Edition, but this was the first GPU I bought when I moved to the UK. I made a new PC for myself in 2016, and I bought the 6700K as the CPU and two 1070s, okay? And well, I have to say, okay, that I have tested this CPU ever since, maybe in some games, but I don't remember them very well. And you know, even though it's a 6-year-old GPU, many of you out there, depending on the country where you are, you may be looking to save some money. You want to keep playing games, but you don't have the money to spend on the latest and the greatest. And that's okay, because gaming is not about playing only a 4K 120 or on the latest technology, okay? Gaming is about playing on any level you can afford. The important thing is that you keep playing the games you love. And to be honest, I find much more interesting when I used to be limited. Yes, I have an RTX 4090 and I wish everybody could have one, okay? But I used to find more interesting when I was a little bit limited in my setup and I had to tinkle with the settings and so on, because I wanted to get like the best performance possible. Having the latest and the greatest is great, don't get me wrong, but it takes you out a little bit of that we in PC love, that is, you know, setting the game exactly as you want. But I know that not everybody has the money, not everybody, you know, depending on the country you are, it may be very expensive and so on. So these sort of GPUs are always, you know, you can get them for very cheap on the used market. This one you can get it for around $80 to $100 depending where you are. So I know a lot of people are, you know, looking for those cheapest price, for those options that are going to allow them to keep playing or to upgrade their PC without having to break the piggy bank, right? So in this case, I wanted to test the GTX 1070 for two reasons. It's been almost 2 years, well, a year and a half that I have not tested this GPU. Also, it comes with 8 GB of VRAM, and considering that even the 4060 comes with just 8 GB of VRAM, I think this is going to be a nice upgrade and a better buy than the GTX 1060 nowadays, which is what is and was a legendary card. But you know, nowadays you can get them for so cheap that probably spending $10 more for this one is going to net you a much better gaming experience. So let's check the benchmark and then I come back with my conclusions. Okay, and we start with Black Myth Wukong, and you know, this is a very heavy game. However, with the GTX 1070 we can play this at 1080p FSR 75% on the media preset with frame generation on at around 90 to 100 FPS. Of course, this is going to change, but generally you're going to have a very good experience with this GPU, even on this modern game that is not the most optimized game ever, thanks to all the technologies that AMD, not Nvidia, is making these cards last longer. And I think honestly, frame generation here is okay. FSR is a little bit fizzle, but it's also because of the game, the way the game works, and it's very sharp, so it makes it look a little bit worse than it should, but it's an okay game to play. Then we have Final Fantasy XVI, another game that I wouldn't call the most optimized game on PC, and in this case, well, we have to play at 30 FPS. In this case, I'm using the dynamic resolution scaling to keep the game at 30 FPS, because I think this is the best way to actually have that 30 FPS very stable and not having to, you know, go on lower resolution. We have the 1080p native, well, with the DRS, and low preset, but I put the textures on high, and in this case, you can see that we can get those 30 60 FPS, which when you think about it, this is an 8-year-old GPU that is still able to play games that are exclusive of the next-gen consoles. You cannot play this on PlayStation 4, and so this is a very good result from my point of view. This is another game that is really surprising how good it runs, and it's the Ghost of Tsushima, which is a very good game. I play it on PlayStation and I really recommend it. However, this game, when you use a high preset, FSR on quality, and frame generation on, you can play in excess of 90 FPS. Remember, we are having, when we have around 90 FPS, 45 FPS as a real, and then the other 45. So I say that that's the minimum, around 40 probably, that you should use FSR. Never use FSR, or try to avoid you going from 30 to 60. But when you go above 40, I will say it's not a bad results. At the end, you are not really going to notice the fake frames. Another game that runs quite well is God of War Ragnarök. In this case, I decided to use just 1080p with FSR on quality and the high preset, no FSR, frame generation in this case, not because you cannot activate it, there is frame generation and you will get much better, but I just wanted to show that, for example, in this game, you don't need a frame generation to get, let's say, a constant above 60 FPS, while in the other games, without frame generation, you're probably going to be under the 60 FPS threshold. You can be 50, 45, so in this case it's better to use also frame generation. But here in God of War Ragnarök, there is no need for that, and the game runs beautiful on the GTX 1070. So yeah, the 1070 is still rocking here. Now the next game is Horizon Forbidden West, a game that I think looks ridiculously good, and I know many PlayStation games are in this test, but those are the games that came out this year, so I'm trying just to, you know, check most of them. So here you can see that using FSR quality, medium preset, and frame generation on a 1080p, once again we can enjoy this game above 80 FPS, around 90, even 100, but I wouldn't say that is the average. I will say the average is a little bit lower. However, it still is a very good result, and as you can see on the images, you can enjoy this game with very good quality and not really noticing all the frame gen errors that may happen, because they happen so fast that you don't see it, so you have a very smooth experience. I wanted to test and go a little bit further with the GTX 1070. I wouldn't call it a 1440p GPU in 2024, but you could play some games at 1440p. In this case, you will have to be more aggressive with the FSR, going to balance, but remember, you're getting more resolution, so going to balance is not going to affect that much the end result, which is the minimum I will use. And in this case, keeping everything else the same, you can see here that we are above 75, 70 FPS. So internally, yes, it's not as high in terms of the frame gen, but I think it still looks good and it's still very playable, very responsive. So it's about testing and how you feel the game yourself, because we know when using frame gen, it's not exactly as playing with native frames, but it feels very good anyway. Now here is one of the latest games that I had to really push on the quality to be able to get 60 FPS. Of course, if you want to play at 30, you can get much better quality, and because of the game, I don't think you need 60 FPS here, but still I wanted, you know, to push it, and 1080p with TSR in low and the low preset, I was able to get above 60 FPS. As you can see, we are about 70 something FPS in this game, so that's from my point of view, is a very good result that you can have. But of course, I think you can push this on better quality if you want to play at 30 FPS because of the nature of the game. I don't think you really need to go to 60, but well, that will depend on each one. Maybe some people don't like to play at 30 at all. And finally, I wanted to take Dragon Age Veilguard. I didn't go very far because I'm playing the game at the moment, and I didn't want to, you know, spoil or rush on some areas just because of testing, but I still wanted to show that you can play. This is a very well optimized game, and you can see here that even with the GTX 1070, we can use the medium preset using dynamic resolution scaling at 60 FPS with FSR on quality, and the game looks phenomenal, and it runs at almost 60 FPS locked. Yes, there are some places where it goes a little bit down, but I think you won't notice that much because it's not like going to 40 or 50, it's going more to 55, 56. So it looks very good and is very playable. Well, whatever your political opinion of the game is, in terms of performance, is very good. Okay guys, as you saw, this thing still rocks hard. I was very surprised by how much this car is still, you know, in the game. And that's thanks to technologies like FSR and FSR frame generation. It's unfortunate that I have to use AMD technologies to be able to tell prices about the 1070, because Nvidia tends to don't do anything for older cars, and they created DLSS, which is amazing, but they could have done something for older cars, but obviously all they want is to keep selling. But anyway, AMD with FSR and the old technology like TSR, TAA, and so on have done a great job to keep this sort of GPUs alive. We saw games running at higher than 100 FPS in here using frame generation and FSR with high settings. So that means you have a lot of room to play and set up the games in the way you want. If you just want 60 FPS, you can just get 60 FPS just by changing settings and setting everything exactly as you want. So in many of the games, this card is still perfectly fine. Even if maybe one game, I don't remember right now because I did the test a while, I had to set low settings, but for the rest of them, being able to just play a high, medium settings, more than 60 FPS, it's really awesome for a 6-year-old GPU, you know? Yes, it's 1080p, but I don't think anybody's trying to buy a $100 GPU to play a 4K or 1440p. However, you saw that it's also possible to play some games at 1440p thanks to FSR, because of course you can just, up the resolution, up the FSR scaling level, and you're going to probably gain whatever performance you lost by upping the resolution. Maybe not all of it, but still you can play some games at 1440p, and that's an awesome thing that you can do, thanks to frame generation and FSR. So you should take advantage of that when you can, if you want to, of course. But for me, this is a 1080p card nowadays, but still you can get, lots of value from it, and it's 8 GB of VRAM, so you can set most of the textures and things on higher qualities than you will with the GTX 1060. You can activate frame generation, which some games don't allow with the GTX 1060 to the VRAM amount. So this card is honestly very worth it if you're trying, to save money and you were thinking, should I buy a GTX 1070 or a 1060? Do I have the money for that? Of course, if you can go to a 1080 or 1080 Ti, you're going to have a much better experience. But I think depending on the price in your country, the 1070 is still a very good option, to be honest. Of course, it's not a very good option. You should go to like 3000 series and so on. But as I said, not everybody can afford them. Many people are going to be looking, at cheaper things on whatever is used in their market, and they will try to save as much money as they can because, they want to keep playing games, but they can't just expand. And as I said, gaming is not about playing with the latest and the greatest. That's the beauty of a PC. You can make those games run very well on almost on any configuration, as long as you're willing to sacrifice maybe some resolution, some frame rate, or some quality. But at the end of the day, you're playing the same game and enjoying the same or even more than many people with an RTX 4090s. So that doesn't matter. Gaming is not about the latest and greatest, it's about enjoying the games, and this is a GPU that will allow you to do that if that is what you want. So as you saw, at least for 2024 games, this is still a viable card, and I'm sure that even Indiana Jones and the Great Circle will run here. So yeah, that's it. Maybe next year we're going to test it at the end again and see how things have progressed with all 2025 games. But as far as 2024, the GTX 1070 is a very capable card. Thank you, and see you in the next video.